What would happen if you found out that the only real fight you have in this lifetime is with yourself? Let's talk about that. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I'm joined by Shannon Kim. Shannon is an international award-winning author, podcast host, TEDx public speaker, and transformational mentor. Her book, Finding the Answers Within You, 10 Pathways Towards Self-Discovery, was inspired by her life story, her spiritual journey, and her mission to help others unravel their past, overcome the genetic blueprint of addiction and abuse, and find their own greatness. Welcome, Shannon. So great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Daryl. It's an absolute honor.
Thank you. I'm so happy we've been able to reconnect. It was a while ago that I was fortunate to be on your podcast, and I remember us having a wonderful discussion. So glad you're able to join me again and talk about some of the things that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I was actually thinking about that before I hopped on here. And I think it's getting almost close to 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
That you and I connected. And what I love about what you and I do is there's always endless possibilities that we're going to reconnect again. You know, like I've got such an entourage of guests and stuff like that. And, you know, I follow everybody on Instagram and like all their socials and stuff like that. And because we've had that connection, there's a bond between us now. And a lot of people will agree with me that are in the industry and that you and I are in. And it doesn't just end because you are on a podcast. You know, and that's what the most beautiful thing is, because you and I both know that our purpose here is to teach others through our life experiences, and that never ever stops. So it's almost like a cycle. It'll always come around and around and around.
Right. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And some of the relationships that have been developed over this time, and, you know, including ours and so many other people, and it's just a beautiful thing. I don't know how I would meet as many people and talk to as many cool, you know, connected people as I do without doing this kind of work. It's just a cool thing.
And that's what I found too with doing my podcast is it literally opened up the whole world for me. Because say, for example, you were on my podcast, and then I had another individual on the podcast, and they've got a podcast, and then they're looking for guests to go on their podcast. And it was like, oh, well, I can refer you to like 30 people, you know, and that's what happened with us. And networking is the most important thing. I really feel it's such an important role of what we do.
So just to dive into that for a second, and we're going to get to your story here in a few minutes, but I love that thought that, you know, being introduced to these people and people coming into our lives. And I look at that as whatever you call it, serendipitous, inspired, right? Like we bring people into our lives that I think are going to either help us or help them or help somebody else, but it's not with no reason. And that's what I believe in terms of how this whole thing works. And it's cool to meet people who I know are, you know, dialed into helping others. And I've met so many people that are dialed into helping others. It's a beautiful thing. And I don't think I'm in charge of how that whole thing unfolds, right?
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%, because you know, you are who you attract. You know, like we are vibrational beings in a vibrational world. And now that I'm at the level where I am vibrationally, you know, I'm attracting all of these people into my life, just like you are, that are helping others. And it really is the most beautiful space to actually be in. I do not believe in coincidences at all. I think people are in your life for a reason and a season. Some are in your life for a lifetime. But personally, me, I have not encountered a lifetime yet. And I know that, you know, there's only two reasons why someone approaches me or I approach them. The first reason for me that these are my beliefs is I'm either going to learn something from them. So I really, really, am in the moment listening to them, or they're there to teach me something. And I've just really simplified it, because I just kind of look at life in so many different areas now where it is really simple. You just need to understand it and have the awareness of it too.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I think, and I agree with that, that there's, there's a thread that runs through all of these little intricacies in our lives, and whoever we meet, sometimes it's for 30 seconds checking out at the grocery store. And if I'm not all, sitting around worried about me and, oh, what's going on in my life and what's wrong, I can give the person that's helping me a smile.
Mm-hmm.
I can be kind, I can be present, I can be all of those things. And that could be fleeting. That person could quit that job tomorrow and move on to something else, but they might remember that I brightened their day. And
Yeah.
maybe they brought that forward to someone else. And so I don't know how the whole thing works. I love that it does work, but I hold that sort of belief system in it could be, like you said, it could be just a fleeting moment, or it could be a lifetime. And like you also said, I haven't done a lifetime yet, so I don't know if
Yeah.
if anybody's around for the whole thing or not. I guess we'll see. Right.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So I was hoping to jump into your story, Shannon. I know you have a very inspiring, wonderful story, in terms of just people being able to relate. I know that I could relate to many things, and I know you could relate to many things in my story, and I really think that's what helps. That's what helps us help others. People being able to relate, planting those seeds. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing your story with us, I think that would be wonderful, and we'll go from there.
yeah, absolutely. But as I share my story, I want people to really understand that our life purpose is always within all the messes that happen within our life. And people really need to understand that everybody has a mess, no matter what. Some people speak openly about it and some people don't. And, now that I have shared my story, which is a lifetime of messes, I have now reached my life purpose, because I discovered throughout my journey of my fears and my anxiety and, just the things that I went through that were just so horrific and traumatic for me. This is what actually gave me my strength and to be where I am now. And I can honestly say that there's not a lot of stuff that I'm fearful of anymore. And if there, are times that fear does creep in, I know with all of my being that I have to go through that process, because it is within that fear that I'm going to learn something, which in turn I will also teach, everybody out there through my experiences. So as I share my story, I want the listeners to really look at their own lives as I go throughout my journey, because there's a lot of stuff within my life that I've realized, I went through a hell of a lot. And it wasn't until I had written my book and I sat down and I reread it before it went off to the editors that I was just like, wow, like I can't believe that I had went through all of this. And it was just kind of like, is this normal? And I sat with myself for a long time. Like, is this normal? And then I finally realized that no, my life was not normal in any aspect. But that was the whole point. It was never meant to be normal, because it was through that I can teach everybody as well too. So I'm going to start with my story. And I just, like I said, I want the listeners to actually go through their whole life journey and, look at it as a different perspective, or except for what it was. And, but so with me, my story actually started even before I was born. My family was full of addiction, mental illness, and abuse. So I'm the youngest of 8 children. And then I also have a half brother. So when I popped into the world, my father was extremely abusive to all of my brothers and sisters and my mom. And what had taken place was the brunt of the beatings and the abuse actually went to my oldest brother and also to my mother. And then I was about 2.5 when my father ended up committing suicide. And then what had taken place was my oldest brother actually took over the role of my father. So being abused and seeing the addiction happening in our family, that was very much normalized. So my brother actually turned exactly into my father. So my whole upbringing was I was being abused mentally, physically, and verbally from my oldest brother. And my mother was never, ever there to protect me. And what was the weirdest thing about this whole situation was my brother and my mother had the most strongest bond. And I understood it after I had my awakening. And the reason why they had this strong bond is because they were the ones that were abused the most from my father. So they protected each other and they basically became best friends, right? And what also took place too was because my mother had seen my father abuse all my siblings through all those years, that was just her normal. She was used to seeing it. She never protected herself. He beat the self-worth and all of that out of her as well. And, so when my brother was abusing us, it was just normal to her. She probably at the very beginning probably protected my oldest brother at the time, but then that would have been beat out of her too from my father. So my mother was left to a point where she was very numb, you know, and as the years went by and the abuse and everything had happened with me from my oldest brother, of course, what was happening with me was, he would call all of us names. Like it was horrible. We would walk by him and he would slap us, punch us, throw us up against the wall, throw us down on the floor, so I literally had no self-esteem. I had no self-worth. I did not like myself. I would look at myself in the mirror and I would think, God, like you're so ugly. I became a people pleaser, at such a very, very young age. And I really didn't have a childhood. I don't remember any really happy times. Back then, I'm 56 years old. I was born in 1969, and, my earliest memories, were of, I had back then, we didn't have a lot of toys. There weren't a lot of toys like they are now in the stores, right? So when I got a Barbie doll or when I got a doll, like I used to just precious, just like this cherish, my doll or whatever. And, my brother had such a sick mentality too that, all of our dolls, all of our Barbies, the limbs were all taken off. He would rip them off, the head, the legs, the arms. He would think it was funny. He would take a pen, he would write genitals, draw genitals all over our Barbies, and our dolls. Like this was how sick the man was. And, so that was what my upbringing was like in my home. And then, because my father was such an alcoholic and extremely abusive, he was in and out of mental institutions. And I grew up in a small community. So everybody knew who we were. So what really bothered me too is the fact that, I would be introduced to people for the first time and they would say, oh, you're such and such's daughter, or you're such and such's sister. And because they, everybody knew our last name, and because of the reputation between my father and my brothers, I was embarrassed. I was so full of shame. I didn't want to be associated to any of them. And that really played a toll on me because I was judged at such a young age. And you try living in a town, which isn't very big, and I wanted to make friends and stuff like that. And I was always judged. I was always looked down upon. And that was very, very hurtful for me. So once I got into my teenage years, in order for me to learn to escape, I became very, very athletic. So I always felt that I always really had to prove myself and who I was. So that's how I learned to, break free of that. But then, once I got into my teenage years, alcohol started to play in. And that was my beginning stages of becoming a people pleaser, you know. And then once I got into my 20s and 30s, it became more and more and more. And then, you know, once I got into my late, you know, 30s, that was when, you know, you are who you attract. So my relationships with, you know, men, I attracted men that didn't physically abuse me, but they definitely emotionally abused me. I let them walk all over me because I was so fearful that I would lose them. I wanted people so much to like me. So I would conform to what they wanted me to be. So I turned into a chameleon as well. And I became very, very good at it. And through this whole time, I didn't even know who I was at all anymore. If people wanted me to be a certain way, I could be a certain way, you know, and I could change, you know, to each room or each group of people that I encountered. I became so good at it. And then when I was in my 30s was when I met my husband. And, you know, I looked at him like I put him on a pedestal. You know, our lives were totally separate, you know, because I came from a family of addiction, abuse, you know, I grew up poor. There was always struggles, you know, but when I met my husband, you know, he come from a very well-known family, very well respected, totally, completely opposite. You know, they were financially secure, very loving, all of that, right? And his family is exactly what I wanted in my life. You know, so throughout the years too, because I didn't love myself, I let him walk all over me too. You know, I didn't respect myself. I didn't stick up for myself. There were a lot of hurtful things that had taken place in our relationship. But because I didn't want to lose him, I put up with this stuff. And as the years went by, I suppressed all of my feelings. And eventually I got to a point where it was literally a breaking point. And what I did was I numbed all of my feelings and my emotions by drinking. I became extremely addicted to alcohol. I was drinking, you know, 6 bottles of wine a day. And by this time, you know, we had our 4 children. And what basically ended up happening was I could not see a future at all. I would wake up every morning and I was totally numb. All I could see was black in front of me, you know, because I had totally lost every aspect of who I was. And I became extremely, extremely suicidal. And then I ended up going to a treatment center, one of the best treatment centers up here in Canada. And that was the best thing I could have ever done because that was the beginning of me starting to understand addiction and generational aspects and all this other stuff, right? So I was there for just shy of 9 weeks, came out. I quit drinking for about a year and a half. No, actually a year. And it was a year to the date. But the one thing, you know, within the treatment centers, they didn't teach me about triggers or anxiety or anything like that, right? You know, it wasn't based upon my feelings and emotions, which is really what I needed to be working on. And then it was a year to the date that I did start drinking again. And that was when I was, because within that year, I could keep myself in my bubble. I was at home. I was starting to set healthy boundaries. I was staying away from people that were drinking. You know, I was in control of my life. But when I started drinking again, we were actually at a family wedding in New York City. And when I was down there, I was no longer in my bubble. I couldn't control my environment. I was thrown back into these triggers. And that was the first time that I really realized what these triggers were. You know, my triggers of abandonment, my triggers of not feeling good enough, you know, because my husband always had it where he was number one, his family, the business, the children, and then me. And when I was put into that situation again, him around his family, I could see it plain as day again. And I was abandoned. I could have those emotions, all of it. So I couldn't handle it after 3 days. And like my voice didn't matter. My voice never mattered throughout our whole relationship. I was never seen or I was never heard, you know, and I couldn't handle it anymore. So I ended up drinking again. And then I drank for about a year and a half. And then it was on August 17th of 2019 was when I woke up and I had my spiritual awakening. And it was like, no, I'm not going back to the life that I led. And that was when I really started to dig deep into personal development, mindset, really bringing in the Spirit of God into my life. And then my life totally changed. And then from that point, I wrote a book. I started my podcast. I started to live the journey that I was meant to live. And now I am today. I've done a TED talk. My life has totally, totally changed. And there's not one thing in my life that I had before that I've kept. I have no relationship with my family anymore, my husband's family anymore. I'm, in the process of getting a divorce because I could not no longer stay in that toxic environment, because my sobriety is the number one most important thing. My respect and my love for myself is the number one thing as well too. And I was also in a process too of, I had to protect my children, because the addictions within my family, they're there. They're still there to this day. And for me to get healthy and to stop this generational, damage which was happening, I literally had to walk away. And that also meant walking away from my relationship with my husband and also with his family, because the addictions are there as well. There's so much denial, and truths that are not being told. And I can see that, right? So in order for me to continue on, this is what I had to do. And I'll be honest with you, it was very, very hard for me to do it. But it would have been a lot harder for me to stay in it and be in denial, because I can honestly say I would not be here today. I definitely would have ended my life for sure. There's no question, right? So yeah, like I'm very happy where I am now. I made the right decision. I made the right choice. And I've also changed the path for my children as well too, which they are my why. They are my why of why I'm doing this and why I'm walking the path that I am, for sure. Yeah. So that's my story.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, I really appreciate, you sharing your story with us. And one of the first things you mentioned was the lifetime of messes gives strength. And I think, whether we're, clean, sober or not, we're moving through life, and messes can happen. However you define messes, right? Messes can be a lot of different things, but going through those, some people might call them trials and tribulations or whatever they might be called, absolutely helps us determine, number one, where we're at, and for me also where I don't want to be anymore, that I want to do things differently, that I want to act differently or be around different people or move my life in a different direction. And I think sounds like that was exactly what happened with you. You just said, you know what, it's enough. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, they don't understand that messes are there for a reason. You can't have just this perfect life. You know what I mean? Everything's going great. You're just on that road and it's just straight, because you don't learn on that.
No.
And it's within those messes that, of course, there's your ups and downs, your feelings are coming out, your emotions, like all of it, right? That's where your learning lessons are. But another thing that, too many people I'm not like that anymore. I don't concentrate anymore what other people think, because I really don't care what other people think anymore, because I know that my life is my life and I'm the one that's in charge of it and totally in control of it. But when a mess does happen for me now, I concentrate on the learning lesson within it, where the majority of people, what do they concentrate on? They concentrate on the outside world. Oh my God, what are people going to think about what just happened? Who cares? You know what I mean? Everybody's on their own different journey. And too many people get caught up on what other people think and what their views are, because that's a deflection of what they really need to see within themselves. And I know that, and I totally completely understand that, and when a mess does happen, it's like, oh goodness, okay, back up here, Shannon. Okay, what is it that I did to create this mess? Or how can I fix it? Or what avenue do I have to take to get out of it? This is how I just think now, because I created the mess. I'm in control of my life. Yeah.
The very cool thing about life these days, and the reason we talk about these things is because I want other people to experience life the way I'm experiencing it now, the way you're experiencing it now, because that's, it's a beautiful thing. It's not tenuous, it's not difficult, it's not painful. And not to say that those things don't happen, because life happens. Life continues to happen no matter where we are on the journey. But I don't have to prove myself. You had mentioned proving yourself through athletics, and I did the same thing. I wanted to be loved. You had mentioned also, I needed people to love me, and I wanted people to love me, and I wanted people to say, good job, and you're doing great. And, but all those things they're part of the journey, but they're fabricated because I'm trying so hard to be loved that I'm not being true to myself, and not being true to what I think is the essence of my journey, which is in here.
Yes.
And I'm looking out here for the validation, and that's not where it is.
No, it's not. And that is the absolutely biggest number one learning lesson that I learned is I was getting all of my validation on the outside. That's literally what was destroying me. And I know now that I had to go through all of the pain that I went through and the trauma and meeting all of those different people that didn't respect me, because that was literally a reflection of who I viewed myself as. So once I had hit my rock bottom and I had my awakening, that was where it gave me the time to literally sit in my stillness and really look at who I really was within myself. And it's in those times of stillness, that I really had the connection with me and God or the universe or whatever anybody really wants to call it. But that was made me really look at my life and say, why is this happening? And that, once I could go through those different stages, that's what my book, with the 10 pathways teaches people, and the process that I went through, where I really learned to love myself. And now, back then, my outside world was a reflection of who I was inside. There was the addiction, there was the abuse. I was attracting all these narcissistic relationships, people that disrespected me in my life. That was all me, how I, the conflict that was happening within me, was a reflection on the outside world. But now you look at my life, oh my gosh, the people that I've got in my life they've got my back. They love me. They want to see me succeed. I look at, my children, how much they've changed, just the abundance that I now have created within my world, it's totally different. But that's also because I healed within me and I love me, and I don't attract people in my life that disrespect me. And if there's somebody that does approach me, that does have that within them, I can easily stick up for myself. I know my boundaries. I know what I will accept and what I won't accept. And I've got the strength, right? Where before I didn't. It's a totally different world that I've created for myself now. And I don't live in lack and limitations at all anymore. Absolutely not. And that's something that I'm teaching my children as well too. Do you ever think that I ever thought I would be where I am now 5 years ago? No way. Talking on stages, be it a transformational mentor teaching people. Absolutely not. But this was all a part of me growing, and I could never be happier. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. And that's so wonderful to hear you say that. And, anytime somebody talks about boundaries, and I think people get boundaries confused sometimes because they think, oh, I have to wrap these boundaries around all the people in my life. Excuse me. But boundaries are for me. Boundaries are, we used to call it back in the day when I was getting, myself straightened out. They used to say, you teach people how to treat you. And that's boundaries.
And that is one thing that I teach my children. You are treating people how to treat you. So you better look at how you love yourself. Will you accept that? And another thing I say to them too, when you have children, if that was if you are your daughter, would you allow that? No, you wouldn't.
Right.
And then they really sit there and they think, and they're like, wow, yeah, because they're at the age where they're dating and they've got boyfriends, and it's like, would you accept your daughter being treated like that? And I love the fact where I am now that I can speak openly to my children, because I speak openly to them about all of my past, um, because these are things that they need to learn, they need to understand, because my teaching isn't just clients out there in the world, it's also my children. Like I said, they are my why. I don't want them to be brought up like how or to have a marriage or anything like that I had. They seen the marriage, and that was the biggest reason why I need to get out, because I had normalized this marriage being to a narcissist, which was normalized. Oh my goodness, I would never want them to experience that. I want them to be in a marriage where they're loved, they're respected, they're an equal partner. That partner is there to contribute to their happiness, not control it. So
Right.
that's very, very important. Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
showing them, number one, what you're willing to accept and not accept, and that counts for me, and I know for you, based on your story, that counts for family members. Probably, especially, I was going to say as well, but probably especially because sometimes family members can be the ones who treat us the worst
Yeah.
because they think they can.
Yeah, and you saying that, and that's what it was with me. You know what I mean? Did they mean to hurt me intentionally or anything? I don't believe that at all. I don't, because say for example, my siblings, they walked that same journey uh,
Right.
that I did. Some of them actually endured it even more. My older siblings, they endured that pain and trauma even more than I did, in some aspects. But I think there just gets to be a point in time where I was very lucky for the fact that I had my awakening. I was done. I wasn't going to accept that way of life at all anymore. I had the strength, where I look at my siblings and they don't have the strength because they're so fearful, because they're still worried so much about what the outside world, being judged, all of that. And fear stops so many people. I'm at that point in my life where I've shifted my perspective. Fear's not going to stop me. There's no way. I'm using fear to strengthen me, so that's a very, very powerful thing. And I know that. And it's sad that my siblings didn't get to that point. But like I said, we're all on a different journey.
Right.
Maybe their life purpose is something totally different than mine, and I know that, and that's okay. But at that same time, I understand that about them. I respect that about them. I have compassion towards them. Um, but I don't, but that doesn't mean that I want them in my life, you know,
Right.
because I've got my healthy boundaries. I have to protect myself, and I also have to protect my children, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's such power in, here's what I'm willing to accept. And I don't create hard and fast, boundaries around anyone. I have them for me, and there's this, over the course of time, there's just this voice in me that says, we're not going there, or okay, that's fine, or let's explore this a little more, or whatever it is. There are people who have certainly hurt me, which whatever, that's their journey. They've chosen to do what they've chosen to do, and it doesn't reflect on me. It doesn't reflect on me. It made me realize that that's not what I want from my life. And talking about kids, it's so, we want everything for them. We don't want them to experience fear or heartbreak or anything difficult, right?
Mhm.
But their journey may include those things, and that's really hard to watch. I've got a couple of boys that are, a little older, and they go through difficult stuff. And it's hard for me when they go through difficult stuff. I don't want them to go through any difficult stuff. I want them to read my books, do what it says, and have this perfect life, but that's not how it rolls.
No, no, oh gosh, I hear exactly what you say, what you're saying there. And it's so funny because, I look back at the relationships that I have and where I am now, right? And I want to be happy. I want to be successful. And unfortunately, with the relationships from my past, I could never bring them forward with me because they would just keep on drawing me back. And I
Right.
know that even though it's very painful, you know what I mean? Like I lost everything in my life, like relationships, family. Like I literally have started all over brand new, bringing in new people, new house, new environments, new everything, and that's the path that I had to choose to get me to where my happiness is. That's not saying somebody else has to do the exact same thing that I did, you know, um, but I that's where the people come in for a season and a reason. Those people were in my life to teach me my self-worth, and having self-worth is the most important thing. Like I look at different, relationships, for example, and I let people take me for granted. It stemmed because number one, I wanted them to like me, but number two was because I had no self-worth, like none whatsoever. I've got so much self-worth now. I know that I'm deserving to have the best things in life, and I'm going to go out and get them. And if these relationships or situations or circumstances or environments don't align where I'm going, I have to let them go, no matter how painful it can be. You know, I even look at, like, the relationship of my marriage. You know what I mean? Like, um, I had to get to a point where I literally had to accept this, what was happening, and that's very, very painful. But, that wasn't going to get me to continue that relationship to get me to where I am today. I knew that I had to release that. It's just how it is, and by me releasing that, that's just opening up more and more doors for me, you know. Um, and a lot of people in so many different relationships, they're so worried about, not wanting to hurt other people's feelings and that, but it's not our responsibility to make people to be accountable for other people's feelings. And that's another thing that so many people get so caught up in, like people aren't controlling my feelings, you know, and I'm in control of my feelings. I decide when I'm happy, sad, angry, whatever, it's how I respond to things.
And people can use that to manipulate, right? People can say, "Oh, you hurt me, you owe me, you this, you that." Like, and my job as a responsible human on this planet is to do the best I can to not hurt other people.
Mhm.
But if somebody starts manipulating me with that kind of stuff, I'm like, I would never intentionally hurt another human being. And if
Mhm.
I did, I'm sorry. But please don't use that to try to draw me back in to this, sick little lair that you have, because I'm not doing it. We can have anchors attached to us and chains and all kinds of stuff from the past. And I love that you've discarded those things and started anew and started fresh, because I think it's very easy to leave those anchors attached, or at least some of them. And because it's comfortable, right? There's a comfort level in the familiar. As uncomfortable as it is, the familiar sometimes keeps people stuck.
And you and I are prime examples of us having to take responsibility for our lives because of the addiction that we held within our past. Because, you know just as well as I do that addiction is full of blame and shame and everything else. And once I actually, really took charge of who I am and take responsibility of all of my actions, that was when my life totally changed. That was when it was like I caused this because of this, and once you go into the depths of actually taking the responsibility and going forward from that, then that was when I could learn to forgive myself, because I think you and I are very similar, where you can forgive others a lot easier than you can forgive yourself. Because others, when you forgive them, you don't have to see them again if you don't want to. You know what I mean? They can be in and out of your life or whatever you choose them to be. But you got to look at yourself in the mirror every single day. And there are times still where I have to forgive myself for different things from my past. And I'm still working on it and I'm still healing. And there may be some things that I will never be able to heal regarding that. But at least I know and I understand and I'm willing to do the work. I'm a work in progress. And I've accepted that aspect of who I am.
I love it. Yeah, I really do love it, because I heard you mention spiritual awakening, and I want to dive into that in a second here, just in terms of how you frame that. But it's so important, especially for listeners who have been maybe not on the journey very long. They're just sort of coming up. And when I used to think about responsibility, I used to think that shackled me, like, ooh, responsibility, scary, right? And now responsibility to me is absolutely synonymous with freedom. It's freedom to be me and to take responsibility, not just for what I do, but who I'm around and who I'm accepting in my life, and how I treat others, and how I wake up in the morning feeling. I decided a long time ago that success, and I've gone through a lot of different stages of success. When I first got clean and sober, I was like, okay, success means I got to go make a lot of money, and that was kind of it. I was still working on myself and doing all those things, but I really put a lot of emphasis on that. And then I found out not too long into that journey, and it worked out well, as far as financially and all that, but success to me became waking up in the morning with a smile on my face. And what does that entail? That entails taking complete responsibility for every aspect of my life. And once I do that, like you were mentioning, everything opens up. Everything gets like really, really cool.
Well, you know what the funny thing is, accountability is huge in there too. Because how many of us wake up in the morning and, we're just having a shitty morning? Well, whose fault is that? It's not anybody. A lot of us will blame it on, whatever's happening, on your spouse or your kids or whatever. I'm having a shitty morning because my kids are bratty. It has nothing to do with your kids, because
Right.
you have to take accountable for how you're reacting. So, you control your own thoughts, So why couldn't you just be as simple as just change your thoughts, change what's happening in your mind? And that's where I'm getting to be really, really good at. You know what I mean? Because I know that, I am in control of all of that. And if I want to have a shitty day, well, then I got to be accountable for it. You know what I mean? I have to
Right.
take responsibility for it. So it's
Right.
just, starting little basic things like that, and like do-overs. You can start something over 5 minutes from now, or you can start something over a week from now. Like, what do you want?
Right.
I don't know. I just look at life so differently now, and I'm just so grateful and thankful for where I am, and all the things that I've learned, and I just look at, all the relationships that I had in my past. And yeah, a lot of people would definitely hold grudges or whatever. And I'm not saying that I'm not hurt, because that, that hurt is still there. But, you know, I got to thank these people too. And I do, I thank them for doing me wrong, because if it wasn't for them, you know, and the things that had taken place, I would never be where I am today. I would have never learned my lesson. I would never have the strength to be talking to you. I would never even be on a podcast, for gosh sakes, you know.
Right.
And I've been on many, many podcasts, you know, like all over the world, talking, you know, from what, Australia and, you know, Korea, all of that. And it's just like, so I look at gratitude in that way too. And a lot of people don't look at it that way. And for, you know, the listeners that are listening to this right now, you know, look at the people that have hurt you in your past and really see where you can thank them, because that is so, so important, you know, because they taught you something. You may not have learned it then, but me just saying it now, you can look back and reflect and think, oh my gosh, this is what I was supposed to learn from them. And then you can bring that into your life as well too.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I've had people ask me the question, if you could change anything from your past, what would you change? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm not in charge. You had mentioned God, universe, source, whatever. I'm not the dude in charge. I'm not smart enough for that. I don't make, you know, the grass grow. I don't make the planets move. I don't do any of that. So there's something in charge of my journey. And I know that when I get out of the way, which I've gotten pretty good at over the years, when I get out of the way, things rock and roll, things flow. You know, when I stop stopping myself, things get very different. I just wanted to touch on one thing real quick, Shannon, if we could. You had mentioned spiritual awakening, and I've heard that mentioned, and I know we're all on a journey, you know, as long as we're on this rock, and however long after that, whatever it is. But how do you sort of look at your spiritual awakening? What kind of things were included in that process for you?
Oh, there were so many things, like when, you know, I don't know about you when you had your spiritual awakening, but for me and lots of other people that I've talked to, they remember it so vividly. It's a time in your life which is like probably one of the biggest pivotal moments, right? For me, it definitely was. It just changed the trajectory of where I was going, like everything. And that was the time, you know, like I said, August 17th of 2019. And I can remember waking up that day and I'm thinking to myself, like, how in the hell did I get here? Like, enough is enough. Like, I really started to get curious, started to question everything. And it was like, I just literally cannot do this anymore. I've lived an entire life, and I was 50. I've lived an entire life of 50 years of what I do not want. At
Yeah.
what point in time do I take accountability and take charge of my life and, you know, decide, what do I want? And that's really what it is. It's, what is it that I want? Because I am so sick of everything that's going on in my life. I can't freaking handle it anymore. And I know there are so many people out there that are like that. They're like, where do I go from here? And that was where I really have to start to sit in my stillness, because I didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted in life, because I had let everybody else tell me what I wanted, how I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to look. I was a people pleaser, and I was a chameleon. I was, you know, worried about what everybody else thought, you know, and it was kind of like, what is it that Shannon wants? I had no idea, none. So that was where I really started to sit in my stillness. And that's, you know, what I talk about in my book, my whole entire journey. I had to embody every aspect of the 10 pathways. And that was where I really started to sit with myself and look at myself in the mirror and see what I didn't like, what I needed to change. I had to look at the relationships around me. Why was I even having these relationships? Do I like these people? Do they like me? Do I respect them? Do they respect me? Where are my boundaries? You know, like all of it. And there were so many aspects, you know, that I was looking at. There's not just one. There's just so many. And that's why I wrote the 10 pathways, you know, to help guide people. And you know, because that's what worked for me. But the biggest thing is you have to sit down and decide what is it that you want in life. And once you know what you want, why are you doing it? Your why is the number one reason. My why was for my children, and it is still to this day for my children. And also, I want to be a mentor for all these people out there, because even though you have an addiction, I don't define myself, as an alcoholic or anything like that anymore. That's my past. That's not who I am now. I am strong. I am confident. I teach, like, I'm a speaker, women empowerment. I want to empower not only women, but men, everybody. You know what I mean? Like, too many of us define who we are now and what our future is going to be because of our past. And that's so not right at all, because you can change who you are from this moment forward. And I realized that, it took me a while. But now I'm unstoppable. I don't think anybody could knock me down.
I don't think so either, Shannon.
No.
Right. And that's a wonderful thing. I look at my life in the same way, and you had mentioned gratitude earlier, and that's really the cornerstone of my existence these days is I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful that I've been able to change. I'm grateful that my life is completely different, number one, than I ever could have imagined, but different than I would have tried to plan or anything. It's gone to such a crazy sort of trajectory. I'm just like, thank you. That's all I can say is thank you. And to whatever, God, source, universe, I don't think God gets too pressed about what I call him or her or whatever. He just, when I say thank you, that's, there's just this deep feeling of warmth and beauty and gratitude.
And I just want people to know that what we want the most in this world is we want to be loved and we want to be accepted. But if you don't love and accept who you are right now, right this moment, how do you expect anybody else to love and accept you?
Right.
Because like we had talked earlier, you need to teach people how to love and accept you. And if you don't know that about yourself, how are you going to teach them? It's pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple.
It all starts in here. Every bit of it. Every bit of it is in here. And then it emanates, right? It emanates from here out to the world. And then, we create this world based on what's going on here. And if I have turmoil here, I'm going to have turmoil out here. That's just right. That's exactly how it works.
And what the sad thing is, years ago, I would hear, people like us talking, it's all in here, and I would think, oh yeah, it's all in there. But until you actually experience it, you're really not going to know.
Right.
Which is the sad thing. And I think that's why it's so important for us to get to that point, like what I did, my awakening, your awakening, that all in its own is a huge gift.
Yeah.
And I think there's many people out there that just accept their life the way that it is. And that all stems to self-worth. They lack it hugely, but they're too afraid to admit it.
Right. And people are on a different journey. I was fortunate to get clean and sober when I was 19 years old. And so my journey has been different than someone who gets sober when they're 70. Yeah. Or 35 or whatever the number is, or never. Yeah. And, so it's everybody's journey is their own, which I think is it's just how it works. And I've tried to help people that will not help themselves, and there's nothing I can do. And that's okay. That really is okay. I used to think that was not okay. But now I know that it is okay. So we're going to wrap up here shortly, but I want to talk a little bit more, however you want to talk about your book. Maybe you help give us some examples of those 10 pathways, and I don't want you to give away the whole thing. Obviously, we got to get people buying it, but maybe talk a little bit about that as we wrap it up.
Okay, so my book is called Find the Answers Within You, the 10 Pathways Towards Self-Discovery. And this book is in the process of being published right now. So it's going to be coming out on October 21st. Now, within this book, I talk about my whole life journey at the very beginning, and then how I healed myself. And then I start getting more descriptive into the 10 pathways towards self-discovery that I went through. And it was so funny how I, because so many people said to me, Shannon, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? Because many people knew that I did not want it. I tried the path of AA. I went to about 5 meetings, and it just did not resonate with me at all. And I know that there are like thousands and thousands of people out there that, they felt that same way. For me, AA kept me in my shame. Because every time you wanted to talk, you have to stand up there and you have to say, hello, my name is blah, 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 and I'm an alcoholic. Well, you're continuing on with that identity. I choose not to have that identity. I chose to have the identity, like I said, I am strong, I am powerful, I am confident, I am successful, all of that, right? Not going back to my past. And, so I really sat with myself. Stillness is extremely important to me and has been extremely important in my journey. And you would know that as well too, Daryl. Because you have to sit with yourself and ask yourself questions, because everything, as we said, is all within you, and you will always get your answers. And so once people kept on asking me that, I'm like, okay, I don't even know, but then I realized, I at that time wasn't ready to reveal anything because I was still in the process of embodying everything, right? Sitting in my stillness and that. So what had taken place was, once I was through that process of my healing, I could actually sit down and I could write it out. The first one, of the pathways is you have to have that awareness. That's so huge. You're awakening. You have to get to that point that you want to change. Another one of the pathways is, what is it that I want? What is it that I want? You ask 10 people, 9 out of 10 people will not know what they want. That 10th person will know what they want, but they will not know how to get it. They can't be descriptive or anything. You really need to know what you want, because in order for the universe to give you what you want, you can't be all wishy-washy. That's why so many people out there, they're so wishy-washy, right? Because they literally don't know what they want. They're on that hamster wheel of life. So once you understand that and you can create that in your mind, it's going to come to you. Another thing too is, you cannot stay in the same environment that hurts you or that's full of toxicity in order to go forward. That's one thing you need to look at around, is what's happening around you. Who are the people that you're interacting with? Are they elevating you, or are they bringing you down? Are they negative? Like, there's all these different aspects as well too. I've just named 3 there of the 10 pathways, right? I don't want to go.
I love it.
But even when I share the pathways, I share the experiences that I went through, and a lot of people are going to resonate, that as well. What I love the most, when I speak in that too, is I speak largely on identity. And identity isn't just about, me being a mother, or whatever. It's about how I want to create that person in me, and how I'm going to embody that, and how I'm going to live and walk that life to create, Shannon being on the stage presence. I have to live right now in this moment of me being a speaker. Well, how do you do that? Do you know what I mean? These are the types of things that I talk about, because you do not get what you want, you get what you are. And that is so important. That is so, so important. And so many people, they want stuff out there, but they don't know how to get it. Well, you have to become that person first. You have to be in that state of receiving. And these are all the different things that I talk about within my book. You know, I just shared another pathway there too, right? So, but yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
It's great. It's great. I'm that your book is going to help so many people, and I will be marking October 21st, 2025 on my calendar to pick up that book. I'm excited because it's so much that we've talked about resonates with me, and I know it resonates back with you, and that's a really cool thing.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing that. All of this information will be in the show notes, and if you want to just quickly tell people where to find you, Shannon, that would be great. And again, I'll put it all in the show notes.
Perfectly. If anybody wants to reach out to me, they can reach out to me on my social medias. It's all Shannan Kym, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or you can go to my website, shannankym.com. Shannon is 2 A's, there's no O's, and Kim is Kym. And yeah, I would love to have a conversation with you. Just reach out.
And Shannon with an A is well, right? Shannan.
Yes, yes,
Yes, that's an important one because I know that sometimes people put the O in there. So
absolutely. You betcha.
ShannanKym.com, KYM. And Shannon, thank you so much. It's really been a wonderful conversation. I'm happy that we were able to connect again.
I am so thankful that we were able to connect and that you reached out to me. And when I seen that email, I was like, oh my gosh, of course I would love to go on his podcast. Yeah, that's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed When I Stop Fighting the podcast, please check out my books and my journals on my website, DarylDittmer.com. Enjoy a 15% discount by using the code PODCAST, DARYLDITTMER.com. Thanks again.